Well, good evening, folks. We're going to get this started. Welcome to tonight's presentation about Rosie the Riveter. Alison Beatty here is someone who has a love of Michigan and the history, and in 2013 she decided to dress up as Rosie to bring attention to the campaign to save the Willow Run bomber plant. Tonight's presentation is going to be about Rosie and what she did. What the title did, I guess, would be a better description. But we'd like to welcome Alison and thank her for her time. Good evening, Alison.
Good evening. Thank you, Justin. It's an honor for me to be here, so thank you all very much for spending your evening with me. And we have a group that is really just the right size. I'm wondering if each of you would share with me why you came tonight and kind of what you're hoping to learn. So starting with you, Doris. Nice to meet you.
Oh, there. I'm trying to help somebody else get on. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. I'll come back to you. Judy.
She's muted. Hang on. I usually mute people so that there's no background noise.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Judy. I joined because I'm really interested in what they did at the plant. I used to work at the Willow Run location.
Cool. What did you do when you worked there?
Oh, I worked for General Motors, so
that makes you like a modern Rosie. That's really cool.
Oh, thank you. Love your background.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe you recognize it.
Yeah.
Prem, am I saying that right?
Yes, I'm a World War II buff.
Oh, cool. What aspect of the war in particular?
Generally everything. I've been to a lot of World War II sites, battle sites.
Cool.
Worldwide, all over.
What was the battle site that was hardest, most difficult to get to?
Probably the one where the bridge of the River Kwai was built, the actual bridge of the River Kwai, not the movie. The movie was filmed in Sri Lanka.
That's amazing.
The actual death railway, which was built by the prisoners of war and various slaves in Thailand, that's still there. The railway is being used by the local Thais to go to work. So it's not totally useless venture.
Wow. So since you have been all over the world, really, truly, to see these sites,
right.
Have you ever seen the bases in like Assam where they staged to fly the hump?
Most unfortunately not. I lived in Assam, but that was as a small boy. But that final battle of Kohima, that was fought across a tennis court. That is the,
Wow.
And the Japanese were driven away by the Indian army. They never entered India.
Wow, that's crazy.
That's how close the protagonists were.
Yeah.
Of the tennis court.
I have a friend there, and someday I would like to go there and visit. It would be really cool. But that's amazing that you've gotten to the bridge. That's really cool. Tammy, how about you?
I just want to learn everything I can. I really know very little about it, and I just want to see what I can learn.
Nice. Okay. iPhone, how about you? If you want to stay muted, it's okay. But that gives us a good opportunity to go back to you, Doris. What brought you here tonight?
I am a member of the Yankee Museum. My family. My daughter is a captain on the B25. Cool.
Is that Delane?
It is.
Fantastic.
And Tony is captain on a C-47.
Yeah.
And so we've been an airplane family for quite some time.
Yeah, for sure.
As a result, so.
Your granddaughter was very helpful last weekend, handing out water to all the thirsty people. That was super great.
Yeah, yeah, she loves doing it. And I came to one of your presentations, and we made voila.
Oh, fantastic! You did a good job. I don't see any rivets that need to be redone.
I needed a lot of help. I would have never succeeded. I would have had to figure out how to become a supervisor.
Nice. And B. Russell, Gmail, do you want to say what brought you here tonight?
May not hear you.
Yep. If you don't, it's okay. We'll keep moving. And then OnePlus Nord N10 5G. How about you? Okay, I'll take silence as just here because you're interested in World War II. So with that, let me, Justin, can you go ahead and enable screen sharing? Or I can email my presentation to you if you want to do it that way.
Allison, I'd like to make a comment.
Oh, Peter, okay, sorry, I didn't mean to skip you. I just know that we talked a lot, so please go ahead.
Yeah, well, and as I probably told you, I spent 35 years with the Ford Motor Company, and Willow Run is a big part of our history, to say the least. So that's why I wanted to see this, and I also will be going to the War Museum. It really looks very interesting.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that. And I like how we have people representing from both Ford and GM here tonight, because this factory really is a product of both of them, I think.
Yes.
Okay, so I can share my screen. Fantastic. Thumbs up if you can see it. Good, I'm seeing some thumbs up. Awesome. Yeah. So usually nervous now. Yay. Can you still see it? Thumbs up again, please. Okay, good. Usually I start these presentations by just saying, like, I always learn something from the audience members. So feel free to stop me and chime in and or questions at the end, whatever you're most comfortable with. I can't see anything about chat, so don't put it in the chat, just like speak up. Or Justin, if you're monitoring the chat, you can let me know if someone has a question. So.
I'm too, so.
Usually I run through this talking about the history of the bomber plant itself, how it came to be, and then I have some pretty awesome pictures of women working in the factory, and we'll look at those. And since we're screen sharing, you'll be able to see them in like good detail, which you can't always do in person if you're sitting in the back of the room. And then we'll talk about the legacy. So part one, origins of Willow Run. I love the book Arsenal of Democracy by A.J. Baim. It reads like a thriller novel, but it's pretty much mostly all true, except for he did get Washtenaw and Wayne County flipped around on like page 6. So that was a little nerve-wracking. But other than that, it's a pretty accurate, good book that traces the history of the bomber plant through the Ford family. So here are two pictures of Henry and Edsel Ford. And Edsel was very young when he took over the company. At age 26, he became president of Ford Motor Company, and that's pretty remarkable. But he also grew up in the same, he was in the same cohort as a bunch, whoops, I clicked on it too early. His age group was the cohort of men who went overseas to fight in World War I. And Edsel always felt guilty that his father would never let him go fight. And it makes sense because he was going to become the president of basically one of the largest companies in the world at the time. But he always felt bad that he was never able to serve with his colleagues. And when World War II was a storm cloud gathering on the horizon, Edsel used his position of power to make the difference that he wasn't able to make in World War I. He was good friends with President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and he asked, what can Ford Motor Company do to support the war effort? And so that picture on the left is when he's very young. The picture on the right is actually him with his father with Willow Run in the background. And what Franklin Delano Roosevelt was most concerned with at that time was the fact that German air power was pretty much the strongest air force in the world at that time. We have been fortunate to pretty much spend all our lives having air superiority over every country in the world. But can you imagine living in a situation like they had in 1939, where the German military had 4,200 aircraft and we only had 1,700? We weren't even the second strongest. We were the 18th most powerful air force in the world behind Romania. Can you imagine how scary it would be if there was some other enemy country that was twice as strong as we were in terms of air superiority? And here are a couple of propaganda posters from Germany talking about how they're going to destroy the Allied countries. And then if we move to the next slide, even as early as 1941 and probably earlier beyond that, Churchill and the Allies realized that the only way to win World War II was going to be to take the fight to the Germans and the Japanese and get them out of their entrenched positions in their home countries. So Churchill was said, you're to prepare for the invasion of Europe as early as 1941. If we can't beat Hitler on land, we're never going to win this war. And the only way to get to that land battle was going to be through aerial superiority, being able to knock out all of those defensive entrenchments. So enter the B24 Liberator Bomber. This is what Franklin Delano Roosevelt asked Ford Motor Company to build. It's a really unique and special airplane. It's I think it would generally be considered quite ugly because it's got that snub nose. It's very boxy. You can recognize it very easily because it's got 2 engines on each side for 4 engines. And then it has 2 vertical stabilizers in the back, which is pretty unique. There are some aircraft that have 2 front engines instead of 4 and 2 vertical stabilizers, so don't get confused. That's what Doris's daughter flies, actually, which is super cool. The B24 had 4 engines and 2 vertical stabilizers. And it wasn't the most famous or the most fun airplane to fly during World War II. People really liked the B-17 more, which is what Yankee has, actually. But this one could carry more weapons, it could carry more ordnance, it was faster, and it could fly further. So it truly became the workhorse of the war. And this is what Roosevelt said, Edsel, I need you to build as many of these as you possibly can. So there was already a factory in California that was building them. It was a consolidated manufacturing company. And Ford did what any automotive engineer would do. They sent a delegation out to California to see how it was being done. And this is the guy who led the delegation. His nickname was Cast Iron Charlie. His real name was Charles Sorensen, and he was an immigrant from Denmark. But he had that same genius for assembly lines that Henry Ford did. So he quickly rose to the top. He became vice president of production at Ford. And what he saw when he got over there to California was that they were building these bombers fairly inefficiently. They were sort of custom building them instead of using the assembly line to its full advantage. And he realized that if they built these airplanes the same way they built cars, specifically bringing in sub-assemblies that were completed in other places, they could produce them much faster and also more efficiently, and in a way that they could parts could be salvaged from each airplane to keep more airplane running. So this is, as legend has it, the sheet of hotel stationery on which he drew the original plans for the bomber plant. And someday I hope that we find this piece of stationery and enshrine it. I don't know how anyone ever got a picture, maybe we do have it. But this is what the factory looked like when it was done. And you can kind of see a dorsal line running through the factory, starting here. That's where parts came in, there's the school. And then moving down and then out the end here. And the dorsal line is there because there were 2 assembly lines running through the factory. I guess you can see one behind me in my awesome image here. And those 2 half-mile assembly lines is where we got the legend that Henry Ford built a mile-long assembly line. It was indeed the largest building in the world when it was built, 3.5 million square feet. That was soon eclipsed by the Pentagon, though, which came out, or which they finished building that a couple years later, and it was 5 million square feet. So, but for a little while there, we had the largest building under one roof right here in Michigan. And I'm having trouble clicking. So ground was broken April 18th, 1941, and it took them over a year to finish the building, which is crazy. It was just that large, and they were building as quickly as they could. And they were already building like prefabricated airplane kits at the beginning of the factory by the time they finished the end of it, which is pretty crazy. And this is what the final product looked like from the outside. You've already seen the blueprint. And this out here is the alleged famous tax turn because of Henry Ford not wanting to pay the taxes in Wayne County, which begins right at the airport property. It seems that it was more a matter of the fact that the airport was already there as they were building the factory, and they realized they needed more factories, so they just pivoted it. But of course, there are a lot of myths and legends surrounding Willow Run. So we have often heard the story growing up that it was Henry Ford's tight-fisted, like saving nature that made it so that they installed those big railroad turnstiles to rotate the airplanes and get them out of the factory, all in Washtenaw County. And this is the part of the building that we saved, and this part over here is Hangar 1, and that still exists today, and that's where the flyables are currently housed. And this is a picture of the first B-24 rolling off the line in June of 1942 that went through from start to finish. You can see the finished doors in the background. And obviously they're very proud here. And there are some dignitaries. You might recognize Edsel Ford here. And this is Cast Iron Charlie. And this is William Knutson, who I think you might remember was president of General Motors at that time. And he also received the highest civilian appointment to the Army that I think so far, even to this day, he became something like a lieutenant general, and he was in charge of all of the home front manufacturing and materiel production during World War II. So he had truly a massive job. And at first, these airplanes were pretty terrible. The last presentation that I gave on this topic, somebody from the audience, because you guys are always teaching me stuff, talked about how he found an old newspaper article that mentioned one of the B-24s taking off from Willow Run, catching fire in the air and crashing somewhere in Michigan, and like killing the crew. So I'm really hoping to get that article so I can read it and add that data point to this presentation. But in general, quality was really bad because people were making too many suggestions for improvement, and they were trying to integrate all of those suggestions. And then also, all of the factory workers were used to building automobiles, and airplanes require much tighter tolerances in order to safely get through the loads that are imparted on the frame itself, and to go up and down from like a 90-degree day like we're having now up into like sub-zero temperatures at altitude. So this was the nickname, Will It Run. It was very sad. And Charles Lindbergh was actually one of the test pilots. He had similar stances on the US involvement in World War II as Henry Ford did. He was an isolationist, and because he spoke up about his beliefs, the Army said that he was not suitable for flying in the Army Air Forces. But as you probably know, Lindbergh had connections to Michigan. His mother was from Detroit. And Henry Ford liked his political views and liked his talents and said, why don't you come test fly the B-24s? And it was a very successful partnership, and he actually spent a lot of time at Willow Run. So if you come to Willow Run, you can stand in his footsteps, essentially. And together, they did manage to work it out. Eventually, they started saying that, okay, everybody can submit suggestions in this time frame, and then we will stop suggestions of the comment process until we create a new model. And so once they switched to like that model system, things started going much more smoothly. And they got their time down to being able to push out one bomber every 55 minutes. This is another legend that we around here grow up hearing, and it is indeed true. And it was taking consolidated over a month. So that's truly a testament to the power and genius of the assembly line. And that's why Michigan is called the arsenal of democracy, because we were able to pump these out in a way that nobody else in the entire world was able to do. And there you can see those big railroad turnstiles at the very end of the factory, so that those bombers could rotate and get out the end. We built 8,800 bombers over just about 3 years, I guess, 1942 to 1945. There were 5 B-24 factories in the country total, and we built half of them. So truly, this one factory alone was responsible for a huge amount of output that was very beneficial to the Allies. Stephen Ambrose wrote Band of Brothers. He's a fairly well-known historian for the United States, and he said, it would be an exaggeration to say that the B-24 won the war for the Allies, but don't ask how they could have won the war without it. And I think that sums it up very well. And here you have some of the ladies who actually built the bombers standing in front of Ford 6000. Which brings us to the highlight of the presentation, which is how were they going to build those bombers if all of the men were out fighting overseas? It would have been absolutely impossible to staff this 3.5 million square foot factory without using women. There's just no way it could have been done. So here are our famous Charles Sorensen, William Knudsen, and Edsel Ford together. I think it was maybe on the same day. I guess I'd have to look at their uniforms. The same day where they rolled out the first bomber. And I like to think that they're asking themselves, how are we going to staff this factory? And of course, coming up with a genius idea like, let's involve the women. Because before World War II, there were a bunch of studies and propaganda and all sorts of garbage that was saying that women were not mentally stable enough to work in factory environments. There was like literally videos training men in how to like talk delicately to women so they could handle any criticism or feedback. And it really required a great leap of, I guess, just maturity, just growing up to realize these sentiments were outdated and really just wrong, and that women were needed in the factories to win this war and bring the men home as swiftly as possible, and that they were more than capable of doing the job. And by 1943, the US Department of Labor sent out a survey that found that women were being used extensively for most jobs. So even though it was true that a lot of women lost their jobs after World War II when the men came back to positions they rightfully deserved, I think, for serving, the country never went back to the complete acceptance of those stereotypes that women were not capable of doing factory jobs, which is incredible. Willow Run needed to advertise across the country to fill this mighty factory. There were thousands and thousands of people working in the factory at any one time, and they were making good money. So they were paid $1 an hour, as you can see from this poster, after their 4th week of training. And this is actually perhaps an advantage of doing this as a virtual meeting, because you can see this poster much better than people normally can in the in-person presentations. And so that was like $15 or $16 now per hour, which is pretty good. It was like they have so much excellent information on this poster, including we need men and women. You have to be at least 18 years old. You'll be given 8 weeks of training. Women paid the same rate as men. It lists out the working hours, which were pretty good back then. And they were, as I said, trying to get people from across the country so they would pay for your transportation, which is pretty great. And then here it says they had federal housing available. This did not work out as well as they had hoped. It became much more difficult to create these like neighborhoods or subdivisions than Edsel Ford originally envisioned, but they still gave it their best shot. And then, of course, it also says if you are currently employed in essential war work, you must be released from your current jobs. And they did that to make sure that there weren't like absenteeism didn't ruin assembly lines and production. And here is another, there were so many amazing posters during this time about women working in the factories beyond just the Rosie the Riveter poster. So I've got a bunch of them in here. In fact, here is one of them. This is a Norman Rockwell poster. He did design that Rosie the Riveter poster that is allegedly mirrored on the Sistine Chapel, but this one actually might be my favorite just because it so clearly captures how women were doing everything. They were doing the navigation and the watering, and she's got the wrench in her hand, and like the cooking with the milk bottles. Like women were just doing it all, and I just love. And look at how ready to go she is with all of her stuff. That is just super great. And at Yankee Air Museum, we've gotten to interview over 40 original Rosie the Riveters who worked in various factories around the country. And here are some of the reasons that they gave for why they went to work. So some of them say that they, like the day they graduated high school, they signed up. Just like with the men, there were plenty of women who were sort of underage, but they weren't really doing thorough background checks. So people were enlisting right and left. And another said, my brother was drafted, and when he went off to war, I decided I was going to. And this Rosie actually ended up making 20mm shells, and when she met her husband and married him, she found out that he was actually shooting 20mm shells because he worked as a gunner in the Navy. So it was like perfect. And then another said, we flipped a coin to go to California or Michigan. And I love this. You remember on the poster, it said that transportation was paid. They overshot Willow Run. Like they were coming from the West and they went all the way to Detroit because they thought that the factory was in Detroit when of course it was just in a suburb basically. And over again, we did hear the sentiment, I wanted to do anything I could to help my friends come home faster. And of course, another reason that they did go was because they finally had a chance to get good paying jobs that were paying them what they were worth. So we can't forget that either. Honoring the servicemen was important as well. They went for all of the reasons we just talked about, but I think that these posters are so cool because they both reflect, I think, what the women were naturally feeling, and then they also inspired the women to feel that way more. So she serves that men may fly. My girl is a WOW. WOW stood for Woman Ordnance Worker. So it's a woman like the Rosie I mentioned who worked with the bombs and the bullets and the shells and stuff like that. And then let me move my Zoom screen here. He can't fix guns in the air, build them right, keep them firing. All of these things to inspire the women to do their jobs. And women did an incredible job. They really broke those stereotypes all to pieces. So by 1944, the women who were in manufacturing increased by 140%, and specifically within defense industries by 462%, absolutely shattering previous stereotypes. And most of them were brand new. They were women who had never done anything in defense or manufacturing before. So truly this was opening floodgates, and there was no going back after this. And then we know that women of color also worked at Willow Run. We haven't managed to find any pictures of them, and this is fairly unfair. The Fair Employment Practices Commission banned discrimination in 1941, but discrimination still persisted in hiring practices and working conditions. So if any of you historians ever find a picture or a story of a woman of color who worked at Willow Run, we would absolutely love to hear her story and make sure that that gets heard by others as well. And then another barrier that was broken down at Willow Run was ageism. Between 1940 and 1944, the percentage of employed women who were 45 to 54 grew by over 50%, and the percentage of women 55 to 64 grew by 50% as well. And this is a picture of a woman working at Willow Run, and she appears to be more elderly than many of her counterparts, and sewing was a vital job. I wonder if some of you know what it was used for on the airplane, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Married women also, a lot of times it was like, you're married, you're leaving the workforce before the war, but here's a woman who clearly has a wedding ring, and the percentage of employed married women grew by 62%. And here's another propaganda poster that says, my husband wants me to do my part. And I think this is interesting because I think it's kind of speaking to both the men and the women. Like, it's written from the perspective of the woman, my husband. So it's telling the woman, like, it's okay. But also, I think it's a message to the guys. Like, look, this guy is proud of his wife for working in the factories. You should be as well. This is the correct behavior. So it was really reflecting what was happening and also shaping beliefs. Mothers as well. I mean, if you weren't allowed to work when you were married, you absolutely weren't allowed to work when you had young children at home. You were supposed to raise them. But look at this beautiful set of posters. This Edsel Precision Products Corporation has these very like waspy women in their blue jumpsuits, and like the kid is dressed the same way as the mom. And it's basically trying to encourage women who are mothers to get into the war. And it's also kind of hinting at like the return, right? Like, mother, when will you stay home again? So it's like, maybe this isn't going to last forever, but it's definitely making it okay or cool for mothers to join the workforce. And again, you see the percentage of mothers with young children growing by about the same percentage as the other categories. And World War II was sort of the origin of like government-sponsored childcare as well. Again, this was a little bit of a mixed bag, just like the neighborhoods that they tried to build for Willow Run, but it was the start of a lot of government childcare programs. So in total, there were 40,000 workers at the factory at any one time. A quarter to a third of all employees were female by 1943. And by the end of the war, almost 32,000 women had come through Willow Run alone. There was a lot of turnover because the jobs were hard. You needed training, and a lot of times people couldn't balance the childcare responsibilities or what have you. And so I think that number is a little higher than it would have been perhaps today. But still, it really gives you perspective of how, like, all of the women working in all of these factories in Michigan are pretty much the tapestry that binds us together. I mean, I would be certain that almost all of you either know someone or might be related to someone or have just 2 or 3 degrees of separation from someone who worked in these factories in World War II. And through our interviews through Yankee Air Museum, we haven't found very many reports of friction. We have heard a couple of stories of discrimination, but for the most part, the women who have talked to us have said that they collaborated very well and people worked together because they wanted to finish the job. The equal pay, there was a way to get around that. Sometimes a job would be reclassified. If you were a woman who couldn't lift heavy things and you needed like a cart to pull things, suddenly that job became labeled slightly differently and was no longer paid the same. But for the most part, women did get a lot more pay, equal pay, much closer to what they had been getting before. And so here we come to part 2, where we show some of the pictures of women actually working in Willow Run. Here are 2 ladies who are riveting and bucking some tail elevators. And I really want to look up the origin of this term because it is kind of a weird term. But if you don't know what riveting is, it's basically a way to pinch 2 pieces of metal together and hold them fast by taking a mushroom-shaped object and then like squeezing it. You apply pressure, and this part that's sticking out on the end gets sort of fastened down, and it holds things really well. And it's super useful because it's much stronger, it's much less brittle at high altitudes and under high pressure than it would be if you were trying to weld these 2 pieces together. So this was extremely important for airplanes. And this back pressure is what enables the extra metal right here to get squished. So this Rosie is holding the gun, and this Rosie is holding a counterweight behind the panel. She's holding what they called a bucking bar, and the gun would deliver a blast of compressed air and squish the metal together. And this picture here really speaks to the genius of Henry Ford, Edsel Ford, Charlie Sorensen, and the assembly lines that populated Michigan. Most likely that, I believe that might be a center wing strut or something like that. And that panel would have been raised and lowered so that those women never had to change their position. So they never had to reach up or bend down or change the angle of their guns. And that way, every rivet they delivered would have been consistent. Very little rework and very little lost time. And then that panel would have moved by itself and the next one would have come to them. So this is why we are the arsenal of democracy. These are the kind of innovations that brought production time down from like a month to an hour. Here is soldering. This is, it's similar to the picture I showed you earlier, but I do think it's a different woman. And I just absolutely love her bandana. It looks like a college like pennant type situation. But here she is using safety goggles and actually soldering pieces of metal together with some impressive tools here. Women were outstanding inspectors. So Charles Hyde of Wayne State University, he's professor emeritus now, but he also wrote a book that was coincidentally called The Arsenal of Democracy. And it's quite a bit more like lists of facts as opposed to story, like the first book I mentioned. But he listed the fact that he tracked the number of women inspectors in factories during World War II over time and found that the number of women inspectors grew kind of exponentially. And he postulates that that's because women had something to prove and they wanted to make sure that they kept their jobs and kept production very high. So they did a very good job as inspectors. And the foreman realized this and promoted them. And it's possible, he postulates that maybe the guys were kind of used to like letting their buddies get away with stuff, and those women were not gonna let that happen. So she's got this eye armband to show that she's one of the inspectors. And so here we are again looking at a woman who is sewing, and you can see the pin cushion that she's got on her arm. Pretty impressive there. And here is what was fabric on the aircraft. The control surfaces, the elevator, the horizontal stabilizer, and then the ailerons on the outside tips right here. These were all made of very, very stiff fabric that were painted over with dope glue, basically, to hold, so they would hold their shape. They were really lightweight, and that was perfect for helping the aircraft turn. And I just had the opportunity to see one of the last flying B24s. It was up at Oakland County like a month ago. And that was the first thing I walked over to. It was to look at how the fabric looked versus the metal. And it's still there. It still has a fabric covering on these control surfaces, which is super awesome. So how do I switch forward in the whole picture? Yeah, there we go. Here she is sewing a very curvy object, just like the lady that we looked at several slides ago. And there is that very, very curvy vertical stabilizer. So sewing was very important. And then I love this picture. It looks very staged to me. Here's the foreman making sure that the Rosie stays hydrated. And if you zoom in, it says these tablets replace chemicals lost by the body in excessive sweating. So take one 4 times daily with water. Your friendly medical department, and I'm sure everyone followed those rules and took these salt pills like 4 times a day. But clearly for this picture, they were compliant. Little people were also employed at the bomber plant. During this time, it was very hard for little people to get jobs in any activity other than the circus or Hollywood. But they were perfect for this job specifically, which was fitting into the wing to do these very, very tight rivets. And this is one of them, Harry Beto, working inside the wing in 1943. So it's pretty cool. Henry Ford has a very long track record of trying to find jobs for people of all abilities. And here he is continuing that legacy, which is pretty cool. And so this, when we're in person, I love to ask people to try to guess what part of the airplane do you think they are working on right there. So I'll give you just like 5 seconds to think about it. Okay, so you can see that it's got 3 sets of 4 sticks, basically. And it says B on these, and it says T on these, and it says M on these. So, surprise, this is the cockpit of the aircraft. Those words or the letters stand for brakes, throttle, and mixture for each of the 4 engines. And this picture is a lot further developed. You can see the yoke that they would steer with. You can also see the brake and rudder pedals. And like what really impresses me about this photograph is that these ladies are doing advanced electrical work with, you know, perhaps as little as 4 weeks of training, probably more for electrical. But seriously, they were cranking out these aircraft as fast as they could. And the training that these women had was far less than any training that you would have today to wire actual flying aircraft electrical systems. And they were doing a great job, especially after they got through the first phases of Will It Run. They were cranking out these bombers and they were very dependable. So I'm just proud of these ladies that they were doing this and that they had this job. Here's a WAC. Some are from the Women's Army Corps, and we're not actually sure where this was at Willow Run or what she was doing like on site, but we know that she was in a position of authority. She has the cuff on her armband and the lieutenant bars that signal that she is a higher officer in the organization. And here she's got a secretary who is diligently hanging on to her every word. And so pretty great photo right there. I'd love to have a desk like that. And this is a great picture. Of course, the cafeteria was enormous. Willow Run had, of course, a cafeteria. They also had a hospital. They had a dentist's office. They had a stage where people could perform like holiday skits and stuff like that. And this cart looks so fantastic. I mean, I really can't even tell what's on there, but I just like to pretend that it's desserts. It kind of looks like it might be full meals, but I just see like cake and lemon meringue pie and like cobbler and stuff like that. And then here's another picture of the cafeteria. And I think they're making like sloppy joes. That's kind of what it looks like to me. But then if you look back here in the upper right-hand corner, you can see this enormous box of Wonder Bread. So if you feel like having an authentic World War II snack this evening, you could go buy some Wonder Bread. And there's an original Rosie that we interviewed who worked at Willow Run. And I always like to ask them, like, what did you eat? Did you buy the food or did you bring your lunch? Most of them have told me that they like to bring their lunch. So I'm not sure who was buying this. Maybe it was the men. But she said that what she liked to eat for lunch was a peanut butter and dill pickle sandwich. So if you want to have an authentic World War II snack tonight, you could have that on some Wonder Bread and see how that tastes. And here's another Rosie who's enjoying her lunch. And if you zoom in, I used to do this, but the picture just turned out badly. You can see like this article is actually an article about women in the factory, which is really cool. She's basically reading about Rosie the Riveters. And then here you can see this beautiful pin that she's got. It's actually a pin of an airplane, a Catalina. A lot of times people would wear these pins that for their sweethearts or whatever. And so she's got an airplane pin. And then she's got an ID badge because security was very tight at the factory. They were very worried, especially in Detroit, right, that spies were going to come in through Canada or something like that and steal all of our secrets. And they did indeed install Norden bomb sites, which helped the Allies find bomb targets more accurately. And the project to design the Norden bomb site cost half as much as the entire project to create the atomic bomb. I mean, one little bomb site cost half as much as the entire project to create the atomic bomb. So this was highly top secret stuff. So everybody had a name badge, and sometimes it says it literally in the manual that they would inspect your lunchbox if they wanted to. You were not supposed to say what you were doing or answer questions to strangers. And there is an original Rosie that we interviewed a while ago who thought that she caught a spy because she was like minding her own business, and a guy came up to her and was asking her all these questions about what she did. And so she reported him, and the next day he was gone. And it's unclear whether it was like a real spy or maybe somebody who was a plant who was designed to test which ladies had loose lips. But either way, pretty exciting. Having trouble skipping again. And then female test pilots. This is super exciting to me. Most people know about the WASPs, of course, the Women's Air Force Service pilots. There were about 1,800 of them, and it was a program led by Jackie Cochran during World War II to prove that women could be taught to fly any military plane that a man could fly. And it was, of course, tremendously successful. And eventually, by the end of the war, they were taking women with as little as 35 hours of flight experience. Like, they wanted you to have your license, but they wanted to have these women who were basically blank slates so they could prove that they could train them. But before the WASPs were invented, there was also the Women's Auxiliary Ferrying Squadron, and these were the best lady pilots in the world. Like, think Amelia Earhart. You had to have at least 500 flight hours minimum flying time. And they were basically on hand at the very beginning of the war to transport aircraft around the country so that men could be released to go fly them in dangerous places overseas. It was super cool. And some of them were stationed right at present-day DTW, the old so-called Romulus Army Airfield. And they were led by Nancy Harkness Love, who was from Michigan. She grew up in Houghton, like no kidding, in the UP. And she's now in the Michigan Women's Hall of Fame. So we haven't yet found any evidence that any WASPs or WAFs flew any of the B-24s that came out of Willow Run, but this is clearly a picture of them coming over to visit and inspecting it and maybe looking at the instruments and learning about how to fly. And maybe they hitched a couple of rides, even if they weren't the pilots and co-pilots. So this is a very cool, very inspiring picture that just shows how women were doing pretty much everything that the men were doing on the home front. So that brings us to the legacy of why this factory is so important and what Rosie the Riveter means and why it's important that this Rosie legacy is so strong in Michigan. This is a quote from William Knudsen, who we met earlier in the presentation, who said, "We won because we smothered the enemy in an avalanche of production, the likes of which he had never seen nor dreamed possible." And in my opinion, and I hope that what I proved tonight is that it was the 6.7 million Rosie the Riveters who made this victory possible. Going back to Charles Hyde's book, Arsenal of Democracy, he had a statistic in there about how much of the workforce was mobilized in the United States, Germany, and Japan during World War II. And Japan had a very, very low workforce mobilization rate because they would not allow women pretty much of any age, married, unmarried, old, young, anything, to work in the factories. And so their capacity was something like 25%. Then Germany, of course, did allow some women and also used slave labor to work in their factories, and their capacity was something at like 55%. But the United States, we broke down all of these barriers and we allowed everyone, we encouraged everyone to get into the factories, and our productive capacity was something like 85%. I really need to look up that statistic, so I have the exact number so you believe me. But either way, when you look at it as a numbers game, the fact that the US allowed all of these groups that they had never previously allowed onto the home front to do this job was what made it just a matter of time until we outproduced the enemies and were able to preserve victory. So Rosie the Riveter has become a worldwide symbol of empowerment, and also, I guess, very popular in pop culture. So here's Shonda Rhimes. This is a poster for the AmeriCorps. Here's Beyonce. This is Pink. And then if you've seen that new Star Wars trilogy, they have a mechanic on the faraway galaxy, and her name is Rose. And I don't feel like this is a coincidence at all. And then this is a poster from Korea that says, as far as I know, it says we can do it. That's what somebody told me once. And then here I also have, where is it? Malala Yousafzai, the Nobel Peace Prize winner. There's an actual photograph, which I really need to put in here, of her making the Rosie arms and just showing without saying anything how powerful this symbol is. You can see Rosie everywhere in wall art. This is just a smattering of the images I was able to find on the internet. And of course, the country turned back to Rosie the Riveter to get through COVID-19. It's crazy. You'd think that they would have just designed new propaganda posters, but they did not. Everybody went back to this symbol because it says something so much more powerful than just World War II. This symbol not only represents what these women did during the war, which was impressive in and of itself 80 years ago, but I think what it also means is that we can solve the problems that we face today if we have just determination, and if we work together, and if we think creatively. That's, I think, why it's so powerful and why people drew on it during kind of the craziest thing that has happened to any of us together. Here are a bunch of political cartoons that came out during COVID that it's just over and over and over again. People, these artists didn't say, oh, somebody else has done it, I don't need to do it. They also drew a Rosie the Riveter. And then there's just dozens of pictures on the internet of all of these iterations of Rosie nurses. So I truly think this symbol has stood the test of time and will be powerful for many, many years to come. And that is part of the reason, there's the picture of Malala. That's part of the reason why Yankee Air Museum was so proud to preserve this piece of the bomber plant and actually get a chance to tell the story on the grounds where it happened. This is a picture of women and men coming out of the training school at Willow Run long ago, and look at them all smiling and happy together. It's pretty cool. So as I told you before, this is the portion that we saved. And it seems really tiny if you look at the footprint, but it's 144,000 square feet. So it's actually massive when you get there. And something else that makes me pretty happy is that a lot of the rest of this factory was turned into the American Center for Mobility, where they're testing driverless cars. So Willow Run was at the cutting edge of its time when it was built. And now on that same footprint, we are testing, Michigan is doing cutting edge research once again. And I just love that. And so the tribute Rosies are here to help. We are Goodwill ambassadors for Yankee Air Museum. And here's a bunch more pictures of Rosie in popular culture. Here's a picture supporting diversity and equity, this one as well. Here's Rosie on the hockey arena or hockey rink. And here's another, this is a women's hockey team in I believe the Women's National Hockey League, who are actually the Riveters. And I think they're out of Oregon, where Boeing has its headquarters. And then here's Disney, code Rosie 2.0. They finally recognized that Minnie Mouse is basically in Rosie the Riveter print already, and so that's their mascot. And here's a picture of us when we toured the Rouge factory with 2 original Rosies. And so we just enjoy doing this kind of stuff, going out to the public and getting them inspired about this awesome history. And this gal who's standing up, she actually did work at the Rouge as a Rosie in World War II. She met Henry Ford back then, and I think it was one of the first times she'd been back in quite a while, but she actually continued to work there after the war was over, which was quite rare. So it wasn't like she hadn't been there in 80 years. But she was great. And then the gal who's sitting down was a Rosie at Willow Run, and she used the earnings that she made at the factory to buy a house for her husband who was on the beaches during D-Day in Normandy. And so when he came back from the war, she had like moved them into the house that she built with her wages, which is pretty awesome. We marched in the Detroit Thanksgiving Day Parade. I actually just got the parade application for this year just today in my inbox, and we filmed our routine about a month ago. So I hope you guys will watch us on, in Thanksgiving to just get inspired. We just try to show the entire country that Rosie Nation is headquartered in southeastern Michigan, basically. We are the home of the Rosie the Riveter world record, which is pretty great. This was 3,700 Rosies in 2017. And our esteemed colleagues and rivals in California were going to retake the record last year, but COVID happened. So I don't know if they're going to try to take it again, but if they do, you know, it would be fun to do it again. We'll see. It was a really fun day. People brought their kids, and they brought posters to honor their grandmothers who were Rosies, and the cars dressed up. And this is, if you are in Ypsilanti Township, you can see this fire truck. It's got B24s on the side, and it's got Rosie the Riveter on the back. So it's just super awesome. And so this is my call to action to you. You now have been passed the story of Willow Run. You know how cool it is, and we need to work together to make this a piece of local, national, and global history, and put it on everybody else's radar. Like, we know that Michigan is the home of like cherries and automobiles, but we also want people to recognize that it's the home of Rosie the Riveter as well. So there's lots to do. You can always donate to the museum in honor of someone who fought or was a Rosie in World War II. I don't have any Rosie heritage in my family. My great-grandmother worked for like 2 weeks and then decided that she did not like working in a factory and did not want to be a Rosie. But I donated on behalf of my grandfather, who was a mechanic on B24s in England. And this is a wonderful lady who is an original Rosie the Riveter who lives in Philadelphia. And when COVID happened, she went right back into what she knows best, and she started making masks and helping her country again, which is just super awesome. And you should also come visit us to learn more about the history. We're open year round except for holidays, and generally our hours are 10 to 4 on Tuesday through Saturday, 11 to 4 on Sundays. There are a lot of discounts if you're a senior citizen or a kid or a veteran, and there's group tours available, and it's really great, so you should come on out. We are located right on the historic Willow Run airfield. So this is that hangar 1 that you saw in the pictures. We are across the airport over on this side in one of the hangars there, and pretty easy on and off access no matter how you want to visit. And so please, whether you fly in or drive in or come in by hot air balloon, we'd love to see you. So please come out and visit us. Here are a couple of events that we have coming up. I put this because on August 28th, still, we're doing an open cockpit day where you can come in and sit in some of the actual aircraft that we have, which is super awesome. I left this in just to whet your appetite for next year. We just had Thunder over Michigan this weekend, and it was super epic because we had both jet teams, the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds, and you need special dispensation from the Department of Defense for them to be in the same place at the same time. So please come see Thunder next year. It's super fun. This September, we are having a speakeasy with our vintage it's not even World War II, 1920s tri-motor. I think many people, especially people from Michigan, recognize that classic tin goose shape. If you've ever been to the Henry Ford Museum, you've seen the one they have. And there was only 190 of them made in the entire world. So even though they're so famous, they're really quite rare. And so we're having this speakeasy themed event September 18th. So hopefully you'll come out and join us for that. And there's tons more stuff happening at the museum too. We often do these cold storage tours. We have several Cold War era aircraft, and we keep them in the bomber plant now. So if you go to these tours, you can get a 2-for-1 because you can see the Cold War airplanes, and it's in the bomber plant, so you get that history, and it's really great. And so whatever it is, together we can do it. That's the message that I'd like to leave you with. So thank you for letting me speak today, and I hope to see you at the museum sometime soon.
Thank you, Allison. That was very entertaining. She did say that she was willing to do a little Q&A at the end here. So if you have some questions, feel free to ask. Anyone?
Or if you have experiences or you've heard of original Rosies or anyone who flew B-24s or anything like that, I love to hear other people's perspectives on this story.
It was pretty fascinating, Alison. I enjoyed it. Thank you very much. And if you have more like these, I'd like to join.
Oh, cool. I do have several other presentations. I do one on the WASPs. I also do one on the lady spies who were in the resistance movements in World War II. So maybe we will see each other again. We like cue the Vera Lynn music, right? We'll meet again, hopefully.
And so you can find those on the museum website?
No, eventually you will. Actually, that's very insightful because we are planning on getting a page up where you can see all the presentations from the Yankee Air Museum Speakers Bureau. But for now, it's just through me, which means just through Peter, okay. I suppose. Heidi, I think I saw you raised your hand.
Allison, my name is Dick Russell. I'm a member of the Highland Activity Advisory Council. I have a question. I heard at one time that housing for those that were working at the bomber plant was extremely limited, and that some housing activities were like triple bunks used on 3 shifts. People would come off a shift and go sleep in a bunk and somebody left to go work. Can you comment on that early days of, they built the expressway to get out there to get people there, and then people had housing problems initially.
Yes, you clearly read your history on Willow Run. That was part of Edsel's dream for this factory, was to build a bunch of housing complexes nearby so that people didn't have to use gas and rubber rations to get to the factory. And there just weren't enough people living in Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, Belleville to staff this factory by any means. So they did try to build a bunch of subdivisions, and it did not work out very well. They were not able to build enough of them. They weren't able to build enough utilities. There were packs of wild children running around because their parents were not available to provide daycare. So sometimes you did see the houses with the situation like what you just described, where people were bunking up and there was one potbelly stove in the middle of the room. Sometimes people were able to manage these shifts where if you had 3 sets of adults who worked the swing shift and the morning and the afternoon shift, somebody would always be around to provide childcare. And then Norwayne, if you've ever been there or heard of that place, that was one of the villages that was essentially built for Willow Run. And some of the houses there are still original. There's not many left, but you can find them, which is really cool. But ultimately, they did give up on that idea and just started handing out ration cards for people to be able to drive from wherever they were. And I met an original Rosie who lived in Walled Lake, and she carpooled from there. And so carpool groups were also very important. And there was a board where you came into the factory and you had to put your name on the board and you were assigned a carpool unit. Great question.
Thank you.
Allison, this is Peter. It just so happens that yesterday they had an article about Rosie the Riveter in the Free Press, and it talked about a woman named May Greer, 95, of Levittown, Pennsylvania, who built or assisted in the assembly of airplanes for Boeing. Does that name ring a bell?
Yes, in fact, you guys just saw her. I'm just gonna pop back into my presentation real quick and we'll go back and look at her. She's the lady who was making masks. Let's see if I can move sideways. Can I move this sideways? Whee! Yeah, here she is.
Wow, we're not there. Oh, there it is, yeah.
Yeah, she's an amazing lady. She is leading the charge to get, well, she led the charge to get the Rosie the Riveters awarded the Congressional Gold Medal, which I believe happened in December.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah. So never underestimate the power of a Rosie. That's what I always say.
I'd like to make a comment. I'm a volunteer with Community Sharing, and we are building a food pantry in Highland. And we are raffling off 2 seats on the B-25 for a ride. We're doing the raffle during August. And so the tickets look like.
Cool.
And it's $20. It's for a chance, and it's 1 out of 250. So the odds are really cool. For 2 seats for $20 to take a chance. And you can go to our website at buildingtofeedthehungry.org and get information. And of course, there's information there about the Yankee Museum also.
Oh, great. Let me clue in anybody who doesn't know too much about the B-25. I mean, this is one of the most epic airplanes of all time. If you are a history fan and you know of the Doolittle Raiders, or you're a Hollywood fan and you know about the movie Pearl Harbor, either way, basically the first, so Pearl Harbor happened, right? And then the United States said, we need a victory to inspire the public. We need to do something against Japan, even if it's just symbolic and not really effective. And so they decided to use these B-25s, like what this raffle is for, to launch them from a carrier, have them fly all the way to Japan right at the beginning of the war when we barely had any aircraft and their defenses were very strong, to drop bombs and then come home. And then while they were on the carrier, they realized that the weather was terrible and that they were not going to be able to come home. Every crew member, and there were 16 B-25s, 80 crew members, they all had the chance to step down, but all of them said that they were going to go anyway. And they made it to Japan. They were able to drop their bombs, and it was a huge symbolic victory for the United States. And then they pretty much all had to ditch out. Almost all of them made it to China. A couple of them were taken prisoner. I think 1 or 2 were actually killed just for doing that. So they did lose their lives, but most of them made it back. And the B-25 that you would be flying on actually has combat experience. It's one of only 2 surviving flyable B-25s in the world that has combat experience. It flew 7 or 8, it's always 8. I don't know why I always say 7. It flew 8 missions in Corsica, Italy, and the Mediterranean Theater of Operations. And if you've ever read or seen Catch-22, our B-25 is from the same bomb group that book was based off of and that author was in. And last bit of fact about our super cool B-25. If you know the Mercury 7 astronaut Deke Slayton, this aircraft most likely flew in formation with Deke Slayton. He was also in the 340th Bombardment Group. And we just repainted it to be Rosie themed, so it's an extra cool airplane. So Doris, it's really cool that you guys are using this as a ride, and I think you're going to get a lot of signups.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thanks for letting me make the plug.
Oh yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about the B-25.
Yes, that was great.
I'm going to add in on the tickets for the B-25 ride. We have tickets available at the Activity Center. So stop on by and pick up your ticket, and it's a fantastic chance to ride on an amazing piece of machinery. And thank you so much, Allison. Yeah, there we go. Thank you so much. This is just fantastic, and I'm having internet issues, so I just thought I'd plug in while I got a second here and everything was holding up. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any more questions for Allison?
Well, it's been a pleasure speaking to you all tonight. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you for coming, Allison. We appreciate your time and your very enlightening presentation. So thank you very much, and I hope everyone has a good evening, and we're going to call it a night.